Hello everybody, today we're going to be discussing something very disturbing. Ian Watkins getting... There's a wolf howling outside.
Shut up! Shut up!
Shh. Sorry about that. Anyways, today we're going to be discussing something very disturbing. Ian Watkins getting stabbed in prison. Now, I don't like doing psychological videos on real-life living people, usually because I don't have my degree at this moment, and that just comes off as very scummy. But considering Ian Watkins is who he is, I don't think anyone would mind if I practiced a little bit. Now, I'm sure you all are 100% aware of who Ian Watkins is and what he's done, but just in case you aren't familiar, he was the lead singer of a highly esteemed band in the UK, and was eventually found to have engaged in absolutely heinous, disgusting crimes. This is a guy who literally has sexually assaulted elementary school-age children. He has attempted to sexually assault babies, and has allegedly injected infants with methamphetamine, or tried to anyways. This is someone who had a revolving door of cult members, who consisted mostly of very naive, abandoned younger mothers, that he would groom and give crystal methamphetamine to make them easier to control. This is a guy who filmed himself having intercourse with an underage girl and engaging in gross fetishistic acts. This is a guy who did all of this and far, far more, who in court, when answering for it, made a complete mockery of the situation and suggested he did all of it for the lols. This is a guy who in prison still repeats his offenses sometimes through mobile devices that he's not even supposed to have. Long story short, this is a bad guy. A really bad guy. A bad fucking guy. One who, if he got killed in prison, nobody would be surprised and nobody would care other than to react to the phenomenon. And I'm sure he also has some deranged groupies or family members that stick by him, but for the most part, no one cares. And it should be of no surprise to anyone that someone did attempt to kill him recently. Ian Watkins was stabbed multiple times after being taken hostage for 6 hours, for whatever reason, by multiple inmates. He was stabbed in the throat mainly, and that injury appears to be his most severe one. But it's not life-threatening, which means the stab wound more than likely just stabbed into the tissue around the throat and not his trachea or a major blood vessel or esophagus. So good for him, I guess, but you probably aren't so happy about that. I just wanted to discuss the situation a bit with my psychological opinions, my amateur ones. So first off, how does Ian likely feel about this situation? Well, it's heavily speculated and theorized that Ian Watkins suffers from severe antisocial personality disorder, and would likely qualify as some kind of narcissistic psychopath on that spectrum. That's not even my crackpot theory either. That is a generally accepted theory. I believe a licensed psychologist has discussed this before, and that is where I'm getting that information. Long story short, this guy is fucking fucked up. Now, looking at this mugshot from 2013, I'm getting all sorts of vibes from it. We can see a very intense amount of muscle tension in the eyes, which can definitely indicate complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is one of the few causes of chronic narcissism. He also is holding a very domineering and intimidating posture at the same time, with a bit of an arrogant, leer on his mouth. Basically, I think he's trying to showcase in the mugshot how dominant he is, how little of a deal this is. So in terms of how he reacted more than likely to being stabbed, he probably didn't care very much. I'd imagine, considering the standoff was 6 hours long, he probably put up a great fight, and probably was very difficult to deal with. I mean, people with narcissistic personality disorder or personality disorders in general are hard to deal with. Putting them in a hostage situation, that's like torturing yourself as the hostage taker. Anyways, one of the reasons I say this is he was beaten before he was stabbed, which makes me think he was quite mouthy and they were upset with him and tried to kill him and wanted to torture him first. I could be totally wrong, could be a totally off-base assumption, but that is my assumption that I'm pretty positive is spot on. I'm not sure what the motive was, but I can say it's very likely Ian did not care about what was happening. He likely zoned out of most of it and probably just felt a little bit of anxiety for his well-being. He may have even welcomed the possibility of dying. That is how fucked up this individual is. But more than likely, he probably insulted the hostage takers and got stabbed. That's my theory. I don't think Ian was scared at all. And I don't even think this is close to the worst thing that's ever happened to him. This may seem like a big deal to us, from our perspective with our, virgin eyes. We aren't, hardcore, disgusting pedophiles like Ian. However, to Ian, this is probably not a very big deal at all. He may have even, considering his heavily tattooed stature, taken a level of pride in the injury and thought it was cool. It could have even given him some street cred in his prison, which is a very notorious prison, where violence and antisocial behavior probably would be rewarded. Not to say Ian didn't cry or let out yelps of pain during the initial injury and healing process and get thrown into fight or flight, and he maybe even did plead for his life a couple of times, but I guarantee you, those are all very superficial things for him, probably, and they likely very quickly subsided and were replaced with a twisted sense of pride. I think this also may open the door for a copycat attacker, which is not very appropriate to speculate on, but whatever, I'm just going to call it like I see it. I think they'll be more successful next time. All in all, this is a highly disturbing situation, and frankly, I feel very bad for Ian's family, because hearing about these stories regarding someone that you once referred to as a son proudly must be horrible. Though regardless of the band Ian was in, you literally have to think of this guy as being in the same category as Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, he's just as predatory, he's just as evil, he has just as much intent. And what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer? Well, he was beaten to death in his cell by another inmate after, I believe, a series of failed attacks. And this is a crackpot theory, but then again, I think it's perfectly fine to speculate about Ian Watkins. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think what's really going on here is Ian is finally starting to really face the weight of his actions. Now, narcissists, a lot of the times when they get arrested or when, their schemes or plans come crumbling down, they can play it off very cool for a while and even act like, this is awesome. I love it. And sometimes they even do. They're that messed up. That starts to fade. Eventually you start to face the music regardless of who you are. And I think that Ian is starting to face the weight of his consequences and actions, regardless of his narcissistic stature. And that's totally normal and honestly expected. It takes a long time for crimes to really hit society with its full weight. Like, look at Davi Vanity. That guy took 10 years to even get exposure. And he's significantly worse than Ian, more than likely. And yet that guy still is yet to even be close to held accountable. And like I said, this is going to get real messy. There has to be a point where he's going to miss his family. Or, consider the fact that his family on Christmas is happy without him, but also sad and would kind of just wish he would just die to put him out of his misery. I mean, that's a hard, weighty thing to think about. He might not have cared about this stuff previously, like I said, being really high on negative narcissistic supply, but situations like this actually can awaken a heavily antisocial person, even if it didn't scare them much, especially a narcissist who's only about themselves. So overall, I think Ian's lucky to be alive. I think it's notable that up until the very end of his, potentially up until the very end of his life, he was still manipulating people more than likely, and I think while he doesn't care much about this, it probably did make reality hit him a bit more, as he's been extremely lucky in life up to this point, even with all that he's done. So that's just my take on it. See ya.